Well, hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, rally our realm, said as we see it and frankly as well. Tonight we have a very special guest, Joe Carritte, former chief in the fire department, captain of the fire department.
Promoted me.
Huh? I did.
Promoted me.
You should, well, that's the reason why, is because you're competent. Meanwhile, you can't find Paul Crowley anywhere because he's out trying to do good things for the folks there at GLIS, and does a wonderful job. And it's very difficult to fill that seat, but you can.
Well,
and that's why you're here.
We'll see.
No, you can.
Am I frankly Paul today?
No, you're Frankly Joe.
Oh, okay.
Even though I'm going to be reading Frankly Joe. You spent 30 years in the Lynn Fire Department.
Correct, yeah.
That's a busy career.
Yeah. I started in 1978 working for the city as a fire alarm operator at the back of the Franklin Street Firehouse on Baker
That's a
Street.
busy one, too.
And I got appointed to the Nahat Fire Department in 1983. I came to Lynn in 1986. I was laid off in 1991. I worked in Swampscott for a couple months and came back to Lynn.
That's a checkered career, but you ended up with 30 years, and if I'm not mistaken, you just retired in what, the beginning of this year?
Yeah, January 21st of this year.
Miss it?
I think I miss the guys.
Camaraderie?
Yeah, the job itself, it's a kid's job, Joe.
You know, it's nice that you admit to that, because I have a lot of friends, as you know, ex-firemen, and many of them develop serious conditions. My understanding is there's a disproportionate amount of firefighters end up with prostate cancer.
Yeah,
is there any accuracy to that?
It's the cancer rate amongst firefighters, and certain cancers that they've identified is about 20% higher than the average population.
That's significant.
Right. They said a 1% increase would be significant,
right.
So 20% is a huge increase.
And what do they attribute that to, Joe? Has anybody done any studies or any explanation?
The byproducts of combustion, breathing in smoke.
Yeah. Which you do in Lynn, because Lynn, my friends who are firefighters said, Lynn you go into the buildings, and you don't stand outside and pour water on it. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
And that's dangerous, but it vents, you have to vent the building, from what I understand. That's why you get those axes and chop the roof and all that type of stuff.
Yeah. It's to let the products of combustion out to make it easier for the engine crews to get in there and put water on the fire and put the fire out.
When I, years ago, I remember going up to the Highlands. There was a fire on, I think it was around Mount Vernon or whatever, August, very hot. And all these firemen were there, and the gear they had on was so heavy, it must have been 50 to 75 pounds, and that hardly could breathe. It was probably 90-odd degrees on August. They're drinking from the water that they were pumping into, because they had to keep hydrating, and it was amazing. And they're falling from dehydration and exhaustion. So it was not an easy task. And yet
How long ago was that, Joe?
What was that?
How long ago was that?
That was in the 80s.
80s. Yeah, the job's changed a lot since
That's
I
what I was going to ask you about, because back then I was on the Public Safety Subcommittee of the City Council. And I was very, very concerned about all this weight that they had when I found that the Japanese had about 4 pounds of gear that effectively did the same thing.
Yeah, but they may not be actually going in the buildings.
That's true.
Europe is a lot different than the United States.
As far as policy?
Yeah, once they're sure that everybody's out of the building, as far as they're concerned, that's a vacant building, and their attitude is we're not going to get anybody hurt fighting a fire in a vacant building. But, in the United States, especially cities with very dense populations and, a lot of basically trash can alleys between the buildings, you either put that fire out in the building it started in, or it spreads, exactly.
Which is exactly what happened in the 80s on the Great Fire. There were two great fires when I was on the council. The one that took place in downtown, by the... where the museum is now, across from the Capitol Diner. That was the mini one, and then the big one that wiped out where North Shore Community College now is. That was, I was always amazed that the chief at that time got all types of notoriety for losing 13 buildings. I found that to be kind of a...
Well, it was only 13. It could have been a lot worse, Joe.
Is that the way they looked at it?
Exactly.
Look, I want to go to another part of your life, which is that you are also on the board of Lynn TV.
Lynn Community TV, yeah.
Yeah, Community
I'm,
TV,
vice president of the board.
and this enterprise is only about a year and a half old now. Is that correct?
Well, in October will be 2 years.
2 years, and you had to take over because of stuff that was happening down at the old station that wasn't exactly kosher. Basically, yeah. You've come a long way from City Hall to here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we started out with nothing.
Yeah.
We borrowed some equipment from Lynn Ed TV, the educational component of PEG TV, public education and government. We do the public and the government, and Ed TV does the educational part.
Right.
So we borrowed some equipment from them and got up and running. And as money started to flow in, you know, we went out and purchased our own equipment. Eventually, we rented this office.
You did a beautiful job. I mean, this is a great studio, Joe. What do you think of it?
Oh, I think it's
impressed?
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, when you say when the money came in, actually that's from subscribers. There's an allocation of dollars that comes from Comcast and Verizon. Am I correct?
That's correct. We get a percentage of the revenue that goes to the city, and the city divides it between us and the Ed TV. You know, they have the studios in the schools. They actually do the school committee meetings, although we
The only
broadcast it.
connection that this or the board has to the city of Lynn is the mayor having 2 choices, and the other 3 are elected by the members, correct?
Right. The original board, the 5 members that sit on the board right now were appointed by the mayor, but when our term expires after 3 years, then it will go to an there'll be 2 members appointed by the mayor, whoever it may be, and 3 members of the board elected by the membership of
Which is
Lynn
right. So
Community
why?
TV.
Actually, you know, I remember when I sat on the Lynn Water Sewer Commission, they were very concerned about it being politicized. And I was a city councilor, and I had to be very cautious. Otherwise, the rate, you know, borrowing money and bonding,
Right.
it's always affected because they're going to say, hey, you're going to be thinking politics and not necessarily doing what's in the best interest of utility. So the fact that the board will be represented in the majority by the membership is a healthy thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Where do you like to see Lynn Community Television go? What is, you know, everybody has a vision. Have you thought about what you think the way it should go?
I think I'd like to see a lot more programs actually produced by the TV station itself. You know, like we have Frankly Speaking, we have
Exactly.
the Community Access, the Community Connector, rather. Who else? What other programs?
Well, there's American Dreams on, and you know, and a
I
few.
can't think of the names.
But
of
one
all
of the
them.
things that bothers me, I shouldn't say bothers me, folks. I mean, I would like to see some, for example, the city of Lynn is 40% Hispanic. I mean, and I think we ought to have some programs that cater
absolutely.
that, you know, to reflect that demographic. And I have to, and I don't want to get into politics, but I have to give the mayor credit in that she's appointed quite a few folks from that community in her administration, if I'm not mistaken. I got to get to Frankly Joe,
Here
and
we
we're
go.
going to rock and roll. So let's get that Frankly Joe up there. And is it up? Okay. In a strange abnormality, I can't even read my own writing. 3 of the top 10 most dangerous cities under 200,000 in population in the United States are named Springfield. Would you believe that, Joe? Amazing, isn't it?
It's kind of strange.
Yeah.
Did Chicago make that list?
No, I'm surprised that it didn't. It didn't. It actually, Little Rock, Arkansas, tops the list.
It's
But
not
wait a minute,
someplace
Chicago
that you
is
would
over
think.
200,000. This is cities under 200,000.
200,000,
Yeah, Little
okay.
Rock topped the list. You know, that's the place where the Clintons resided for a while. I wonder why. And Worcester is the one that rounded off the top 10.
Worcester, Massachusetts?
Yeah, they're number 10, most dangerous, under 200,000.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting is that Illinois, Connecticut, and Massachusetts each have 2 out of the 10, which doesn't bode well for those 3 states. With the exception of Springfield, Missouri, all are located east of the Mississippi. So those western states or cities, you wouldn't think, but they are.
I bet Texas doesn't have a problem.
Well, I don't know. Because they have the right to carry guns and stuff like that.
Exactly.
What else is fascinating to me is that 8 of the 10 cities are north of the Mason-Dixon line, and only 2 from the former Confederacy. So I'm going to read them out to you, folks. In order of most dangerous, Little Rock, Arkansas. Next is Rockford, Illinois. That doesn't surprise me. Springfield, Missouri. Lansing, Michigan. That's the capital of Michigan, folks. Not Detroit. Hartford, Connecticut. That surprised me. Springfield, Mass. That did not surprise me. Springfield, Illinois is number 7. New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale is located, of all places. Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Worcester. Happily, Lynn didn't qualify for that list.
Well, I'm glad to hear that also.
Aren't you?
Yes.
I am myself. Recently, folks, and this is you know, you see things and it makes you think. So if we can get hum up there, and it goes like this. Recently, I spotted a student sporting a T-shirt that read, "Stop the Violence." Now, Joe, you and I both know that's a very noble sentiment, and all of us are in favor of that. And I
Who
thought,
would be against it?
I don't know. Some people are, you know, because they don't think it through. They don't realize they are. Because think about this. Maybe, just maybe as a nation, we should start by not importing folks from violent places.
Well,
I mean, we're importing violence, aren't we?
Well, we don't necessarily go out and say, hey, come to the United States. People come here for whatever reason. It's a land of
That's
opportunity.
true. But if they
we're
come
not-
legally, we have some control over that, don't we?
Well, exactly.
All right, so the illegality, open borders, put stress on many cities under 200,000, right?
Right.
Lynn has been put under a tremendous amount of stress from the open border policies of the Obama administration. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I guess I would.
I think it's a fair statement. Not only its impact on the school system, it has an impact on violence because they're coming from violent places, right? And it also has brought a whole host, and we'll get into this in some other show, folks, diseases that had not been around for many years are now surfacing. It becomes serious. Nobody's talking about it. Let's get to Mark It Down. This is on a similar vein, Joe, and you can, I think I have a sheet there so you can follow along. And it says things to think about, but it's actually Mark It Down. Latin America holds the ignominious distinction of housing 43 of the 50 most violent cities in the world. Imagine that, Joe. 43 of the top 50 violent cities are in Latin America. 4 in the United States, and this surprised me. Detroit, which was number 36, New Orleans at 34, Baltimore 26, and St. Louis is 14, and I guess what's happening currently in St. Louis bodes to that. But you asked about Chicago. It didn't make the list.
It's unbelievable to me that Chicago didn't make the list.
Did not make the list. And maybe if it was strictly murder, that would be one thing, because it's an aggregate of violent crime. Tokyo tops every list as the safest city in the world. You know how dense they are.
All right, there's millions of people crammed in the...
Jammed in.
Yeah.
And yet, they seem to operate, you know?
Everybody must be happy.
Apparently. Now, other top-ranked cities, and follow this, is Singapore, which is very strict in its laws, very strict. Osaka, which is also in Japan, Zurich, Stockholm, Vienna, Amsterdam, which surprised me because they have a lot of, they can do pot there legally and prostitution's legal, and yet their crime rate is down.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. Melbourne, Sydney, Australia, Toronto, Canada, and this is a real surprise to me, New York City.
No violent crime in New York City?
No, it's a pretty safe,
Wow.
pretty safe city. Of the top 25 countries listed as the world's safest, look at this, Joe, 18 are European. Iceland is the consensus number 1. Everybody says that's the place to go if you want to avoid violence and crime. Then
And the weather's pretty good there, too, I guess.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's fairly warm because the Gulf Stream goes up there and kisses the shore. Plus, it's volcanic, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of geysers that keep it warm.
Yeah, but you would think something that's named Iceland would be a cold place to go.
Exactly. It's actually kind of the opposite. In fact, Greenland is far more severe weather-wise than Iceland, even though Iceland, I believe, is further north.
Maybe they should swap names, Joe.
Yeah, they should. Very true. That's why, you know, that there's a famous Joe Verdi, Joe Green. You know, Verdi means green. and Giuseppe Verdi wrote operas. Are you an opera writer? I mean, I know you're part Italian.
I'm half Italian, half Irish.
Well, that's a great combination. That's my kids. That's
Half Italian, half Irish.
That's a great combination. So you can have corned beef and cabbage and pizza at the same time.
Exactly.
What's
Get
wrong
the
with
best
that?
of both worlds as far as food goes.
No question about it. And intelligence and good looks.
Oh, thank you. Are you running for office?
No, not at all. Please, folks, don't even think about it. And if you draft me, I will not serve. So, Denmark, Austria, Portugal, Czech Republic, Switzerland, Canada, Japan, Slovenia, the home of Donald Trump's wife. Slovenia, very safe place. Ireland, speaking of which are heritage, it's pretty good to be an island. You go to the pubs
it
and that's
wasn't
it.
years ago.
No, it is now.
Now it
and,
is,
and
yeah.
it's very
It's
prosperous
changed a
over
lot.
there, yeah. Finland, Sweden, as usual, although that's getting problems with the immigration there.
Yeah.
Australia and New Zealand are interchangeable in the top 10. As for the Americas, Joe, now this is something, and we're talking about North, South, and Central, only Canada ranked number 8, safest. Meanwhile, the United States is ranked, we were 113th, okay, out of 163. Conversely, we are the 50th most dangerous country in the world of the 163 recognized. Among the most dangerous nations, folks, are Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, and the Central African Republic. Now, these are fundamentally the countries from which President Trump wanted to put a ban, a temporary ban,
Right.
which, by the way, makes a lot of sense, because why would you want to import problems?
Yeah, it makes sense
Violence.
to me.
Yeah. So maybe it's a good idea for Congress and for some of these crazy court decisions to factor in the fact that maybe we should be rewarding and favoring and encouraging immigration from countries with low crime rates and restricting immigration from countries with high crime rates. That makes sense to me. You know, when they're talking about educational reform, I don't know.
It makes sense, but do you really have any control over who comes?
Yeah, we do. We have the right to vote, and we should be vocal. You know, and this is the whole point. And if you have, and it starts at every level, Joe. You can, the local level. If we want to make Lynn a sanctuary city, that is inviting the problem.
Well, look at what's going on in some of the European countries that
Have invited it. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, forget about the European countries. Take a look at what's happening in our country. We're more violent than they are. You know, as it turns out to be. Are you ready to think?
If you're going to make me.
Are you folks ready to think? Because we have things to think about. Did you know, this is a horrible figure, 73 million people died in World War II. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yes. And you know, in our age, we thought the Vietnam War was
50,000.
right. It's a drop in the bucket compared to World War
Well,
II.
actually, I should restate that because I don't have any idea how many,
they lost.
Yeah, how many Vietnamese were killed and stuff like that.
That's in the whole world you're talking about for the World War II.
Well, you know, the Russians themselves, you know, if we want to be fair about it, historically fair, the Soviet Union actually took the brunt of the German might. They lost 25 million people.
Yeah.
25, they alone. I believe the Germans lost about 8 million, which is a big number for their population. We actually didn't lose that many in real terms. I think we had about 1 million total casualties. I don't know how many deaths there were. But relative to these other nations,
we didn't get hurt that
we
bad.
didn't get hurt that much, yeah. And think about it. That
But
war,
you know, the good thing about the United States was our casualties were more military, whereas in some of these other countries,
oh no, they were, yeah, exactly. That's a great
civilian
point, Joe.
those were civilian casualties.
Well, you remember Kurt Vonnegut wrote a book called Slaughterhouse 5, and they just leveled Dresden. Worse than Nagasaki and Hiroshima, not using atomic bombs. You're right, Joe. The real danger was the citizenry, the non-combatants.
Right.
Because we bombed them to death.
I mean, Germany got pretty wiped out.
Oh, it was merciless. Now the Earth, which you and I live on, although I don't know about you, you may come from some other place. The
I think I'm on Earth, Joe.
32.
It's hard to stay here with you, though.
The Earth is 32.1% iron, which I never knew,
I didn't
and
know that.
30.1% oxygen, which I never knew. So we're basically iron oxide, right? We mix
Right.
the two, otherwise known as rust. You know iron oxide rust?
Well, is that an age thing, Joe? Are you more rusty than I am?
Much.
Because you've been here longer?
I've been longer and a few other things added to my rust. The center of the Earth, which absolutely surprises me, is 10,380 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's as hot as the sun. Would you believe that one?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. Next, folks, listen to this one. And Pedro, we can throw up a little quadrant here. 77% of the Earth's population lives in the northeastern quadrant. You see where it says Africa? See, 77%, that part of the world. That's the northeastern quadrant, and that would be Europe, Asia, and Africa. And that's why it's so important that we deal with North Korea, because that's where all the folks are.
Right.
You know, they can do a lot of damage there.
Absolutely, they can.
So we better think about that. Now, I kind of like this one, Joe. Chiquita Banana, remember her?
Yeah.
Well, apparently she's from Ecuador.
It kind of looks that way if you look at this
What's it say about
graphic.
Ecuador?
Ecuador exports $2 trillion worth of bananas every year.
That's a pretty good number, isn't it?
That's a bunch of bananas,
That's
Joe.
a lot of bananas. $2 trillion worth of bananas a year, and a lot of them at Market Basket.
Market Basket,
Wyoming
yeah.
Square, right? No, Wyoming
Market
Square,
Square.
Market Square. Now, if in case you're interested, koala bears sleep 20 hours a day. You see the cute little suckers eating you. 20 hours a day they sleep.
That's about equal to a teenager, isn't it?
Yeah, or me. Yeah, whatever. Koala animals date back for 25 million years, so they've been around a little bit.
A week or two, anyways.
Yeah, they evolved. You want to hear the best one?
It's not a bear.
It's not a bear. A koala bear is not a bear. You have a bright light bulb, you know? You're not just a fireman.
I'm just reading what you wrote me.
Don't tell the folks that. You're supposed to fake it. 65 years ago, the penguin forgot how to fly. He's been immobile. He's got wings, but can't do anything with them. 65 years. He's been marching ever
62 million years
Oh,
ago.
62 million years. See, that's what you can read what I wrote.
You got to look out of the bottom half of
You
your
got to admit, it's kind of cute. Now take a look at that. These are the layers of the Earth. We have the crust, the mantle, the outer core, and the inner core. That inner core is as hot as the sun. Can you believe that? And the mantle, that's where all that magma comes from, when the earthquakes and all that lava comes up, right?
Yeah.
I don't think the crust is more than a couple of miles thick, is it? Not that much. So, how about that one? Now look at this. Look how sharp my guy is. Think about this, Joe. The 4 elements that make up the Earth, or 90% of the Earth. And I never knew this. You read them out. You can see it.
Iron, oxygen, silicon, and magnesium. These elements make up more than 90% of the Earth's mass.
Iron ore is 35% of the Earth's mass in itself, which kind of surprised me. I mean, that's a critical element, apparently. We should know about oxygen.
Well, you need it to live.
I think we do.
21%, at least.
Yeah. But wait, actually, the crust is what? About almost 50%.
46.6% of the crust.
Of our crust, where you and I are, yeah,
And 30% of the mass of the entire Earth.
is oxygen,
Yes.
one way or another. And the other one surprised me.
Silicon?
Yeah,
15% of the Earth's mass.
that's a pretty good number. And what comes from silicon? I have no idea. Folks, if anybody out there knows what silicons are, I know that we seal tubs and stuff like that with silicone, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a sealer of some sort, right?
Right. Probably contains everything.
Good point. It holds everything together? That's a great point, Joe. And what's the other one there?
Magnesium ranks close behind silicon in mass percentage, making up an estimated 13% of the Earth's mass.
Well, magnesium is a soft metal. Anything that ends in RUM, folks, is a metal. And that's, when we see the fireworks,
Yeah.
and they all burn at different colors. Potassium, magnesium, calcium, sodium. They're all metals. But you can't put sodium on your hand because it oxidizes them. You should know that from your fire days, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You don't want water on magnesium.
Or any of it, right? They'll go ba-boom.
Yeah.
It oxidizes. You have to contain it, I think, in oil. or wax or whatever, don't you?
Magnesium? Well,
Any
they
of,
make
any of
special-
those sodiums. Sodium, magnesium, potassium, all of those, even calcium. See, calcium's a metal, folks. People don't realize that. So, if they keep tuning into this show, Joe,
You're going to teach them something.
they're going to
Well,
learn
it's
something.
the teacher in you is coming out, Joe.
It is. You can't beat it out of me.
You'll never stop.
Well, it's a noble profession.
Well, I learn something every time I talk to you.
Oh, please. You know what I learned? I learned humility the other day. Very important. Folks, if ever there should be people who are anointed as saints, they belong at Tech on the Annex building where I subbed in a special ed class earlier last week. And this is true. I didn't know what I was getting into. There were a bunch of little kids there. I shouldn't say a bunch, there's only about 5 or 6. And there were a number of teacher aides and teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And these kids, well-dressed, well-mannered, kept clean, nice. They weren't toilet trained. They wore diapers. I didn't know it until I had to go change one. Teenage kid, I had to go change with another lady to do it every day. They had to be fed like you do a baby. And the work that these folks do with these kids is amazing. And I want to compliment parents who take these kids and give them love and care, because these kids were well maintained. It isn't why they were neglected. And for a parent to take care of that kid, I mean, it's just the respite of us at school, giving parents just a little time off to breathe, is a wonderful thing. And for all of you teachers and dedicated folks at Lynn Tech, I take my hat off for you for taking care of those kids. Joe is beautiful. And, taught me a bit. I mean, I got lucky. I got healthy kids, relatively healthy kids.
Hey, just when you think you have problems, you experience something like that and you realize that, hey, maybe my problems aren't as big as I thought they were.
It's actually a little more than that, Joe, because what happens is it makes you realize the type of people that work with those types of kids, that do that. They're like unknown heroes that every day get up and take care of kids like that. I could say the same thing about your profession. I mean, you guys go in there. When my son, who's diabetic, in the old days, you guys would come to the house if he was in a shock or something. I mean, that's a scary thing to see a kid. You know what I'm talking about, because you guys did it all the time. I mean, you're out there saving lives. A pilot once said to me, pilots don't end up in a year that long. And I asked him about, it must be exciting to be a pilot. And he said, you know what a pilot's life is all about? Hours and hours of boredom, punctuated by 1 second of sheer terror.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, you can describe the fire service like
Same
that.
way.
There's a lot of boredom, and you do have those moments of terror, or you're dealing with something that the average person probably never sees in a lifetime.
Oh, exactly. A friend of mine, and I don't want to mention his name because he gets mad when I do, told me he went to a
Get
fire.
mad at you?
Yeah. I say things sometimes. He went to a fire in which a person was charred, and they went to move the charred body, and the arm fell off. I mean, that was his introduction to firefighting. I don't think I could handle that myself, and yet these are the types of things that firefighters are. Policemen. I mean, they're there, and I'm a fan of the blue. You got that? I'm a fan. I'm not a fan of the people that knock police.
No, neither am I. I mean,
can't-
I work closely with them as a firefighter, and you see the stuff that they put up with and the way
It's incredible,
people treat
right?
them. It's like, why would you want to do that?
They are also, when you're out there on the line or doing traffic, hours and hours, quote unquote, of boredom, punctuated by a sheer moment of terror, right? Mm-hmm. Those guys face terror at any moment. Right. You know that there were a couple of 100 cops that were murdered, executed this year? That's unheard of. Unheard. So we talked about violence. There's a disrespect for law. Disrespect. And I'm saying that part of that has to do with the fact that if you allow illegal people to come into the country, that's breaking the law to start with, and if you make excuses for that, aren't you lowering the bar?
I'm sure you were brought up the same way that I was, to respect police officers. And, my father said, oh, you want to be on the fire department, you better never get in trouble. So that kind of kept
Well,
me out
yeah.
of trouble
But
growing up.
But shouldn't a society not tolerate deviation? Which we do. We make excuses for bad behavior,
Yeah.
right? We know when they talked about Charlottesville and they one-sided it, that the white Aryan nation, the white supremacists, and the Ku Klux Klan, oh, they're the bad guys. Sorry, folks. There were a lot of bad people in there all over the place. I'm not going to excuse the Ku Klux Klan, the white Aryan nation. I can't deal with those folks to start with. But it's not one-sided. These folks out in Berkeley that were breaking up and burning everything, they call it the Antifa, or whatever they are, or however it's called. They're violent suckers. They're anarchists. They want to rip the system down.
They have the right of free speech in this country.
Oh, really? There's a limitation of free speech.
Oh, I don't disagree with you on that, Joe. I mean, once you start getting violent to prove a point, you've lost probably 90% of the country, because who wants to live in a violent society?
Well, you know what's happening, Joe, and this is fascinating, and I'm glad to talk to you about it. You know, the NFL numbers are way down. Well, a lot of folks in the NFL aren't showing the type of respect they should. They're making millions of dollars a year. They should be on the ground, kissing the ground, saying, what a great nation this is, right? Not protesting it. I mean, my father went to the 3rd grade. He came to this country, he's 15 years old. Couldn't speak English, nothing. You know what he said about this country when he was 86 years old and was on his deathbed? He says, "My adopted amada." That's what he said. He loved this country. This country gave him the opportunity to do well. And I wish people would appreciate that instead of have expectation.
I think the majority of immigrants in this country probably feel the same way as your father did. But,
I agree with you.
There's a smaller percentage that thinks that, they came here to the land of opportunity with their hand out. But I think the majority of immigrants feel the same way your father did.
I agree with you, absolutely. But those ones come in by application, by applying to come in and seeking citizenship and going through the process. They don't, I don't know if you ever did this, Joe. I'm guilty, folks. Every once in a while, I jumped over the fence, you know what I mean? Or I snuck into a theater, you know what I mean? You're not supposed to do those types of things, right? You get what I mean? Every once in a while.
I don't think
I'm
I
not
ever
holier
did
than
that. I used to go with my quarter to the Warner Theater on Saturdays while my mother went to the hairdressers.
Yeah.
But you could see a cartoon,
Yeah, it
get
was an all-day job.
popcorn,
Yeah.
you watch a couple of movies.
But when you do something like that, there's those, then I had to go to confession. And in those days, folks, I was deathly afraid of going to see the priest and telling my sins. You know what I did, Joe? I was actually a pretty bright businessman back then. You remember the scapulars?
Yeah.
So the scapulars were the quarter, something like that. But if you bought a scapula, if you had a scapula, wearing a scapula, no matter what you did in your life,
You were excused.
you had a priest there at the last moment so you could, so you could make peace and get the ticket into the big house, right?
Right.
I bought the scapula. I have all the time.
For a quarter?
Yeah, they were insurance
You're
policy.
trying to buy your way in.
Yeah, well, no, the insurance policy, right? Witty. Let's get to witty, Joe.
All right. I thought you were just
got
being
the
witty.
Do you know what the difference between stupidity and genius is? That the genius has its limits.
By Albert Einstein, he said that.
Yeah, he's pretty bright guy. E equals MC squared, and then this is right up your alley. Go ahead.
A witty woman is a treasure. A witty beauty is a power. And George Meredith wrote that.
That makes a lot of sense if you think about it.
Yeah.
You get a smart, good-looking woman, and I'll see you later, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Hey, everybody wants to be entertained.
I agree. But wait a second, this actually works.
Reader's Digest had a section, laughter is the best medicine. So, yeah, absolutely a witty woman is
And by the
power.
way, I could say this is not sexist because you could flip it. You could say a witty man is a treasure. A good-looking or a well-conditioned witty man is a powerhouse. And, it works both
Exactly.
ways. If you fight angry, you make a lot of mistakes, Joe.
Yeah,
and when
true.
you fight a sharp, witty fighter like me, you can't make mistakes. And I guess he proved it.
Floyd Merriweather, yeah.
Yeah, but he did prove it, didn't he?
Mayweather. Yeah, he did.
He knocked the Irish guy out.
Yeah.
Goes to show you.
Well, isn't that an Irish trait, brawling?
Oh, they love to
Getting
brawl.
drunk and brawling?
Oh, yeah. And they're good at it, too.
I'm not having any beers with you because you'll argue with me from now till the cows come home.
You know, the funny thing, I've never partaken in alcoholic
Oh,
beverage.
thank God.
Yeah, exactly. You heard it first. You heard it first here. How about this one? This pertains to me, I guess. Or could. This is Cyrano de Bergerac. Remember him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
A large nose is the mark of witty, courteous, affable, generous, and liberal man.
Well, I think the two of us could qualify for that. Now, conquered people tend to be witty. They have to be.
You're trying to survive at that point.
Oh, exactly.
Anything helps.
So, Joe, we got to go to comments, and this is because of you're on the board. I think this is instructive that you get a flavor for our audience. And by the way, I want to thank each and every one of you out there. It's a pleasure getting comments from you, meeting on the street, talking about things. You know, life is serious. So, like Joe said, laughter is the great pacifier. You know.
You know, in the short period of time that the TV station was off the air, you know what the biggest complaint the city council received was, when is frankly Joe coming back on? You and Paul are a hit with the elderly community, apparently.
Imagine that. I have to be modest, folks. I mean,
Is that age discrimination?
well, if there's age discrimination, I'm long gone because I'm ready to push the, you know, my meat is up there. As a matter of fact, I'll be getting a little older in a few days. So,
Well, happy birthday.
well, thank you. You just had one, by the way, in August.
In August.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a Libra, and my
I'm a Leo.
Yeah, you're a Leo.
Leo.
My son's a Leo. How are you, son? Good afternoon, Joe and Paul. Your latest show was excellent. You know, you're right about that. With your dissection
That's kind of a biased opinion.
Did I write this? The latest show was excellent with your dissection of the recent Lynn primary results. I find that you are absolutely correct, and the fact that the signage does not vote, as was proven in the Ward 2 race. I actually think that he got less votes than the amount of signs he had out, which
Well,
is a problem.
I don't think anybody would argue that with you, Joe.
But I think that that's true.
Yeah,
And that's an amazing thing.
absolutely.
Yes, it is really sad that only just over 11% of the voters cast the vote. But I'm sure many felt that why vote when there's nothing but a beauty contest? There's a lot of truth to that, too.
Right, and I think the item alluded to the fact in their article about the low voter turnout that, you know, they were out interviewing people and they couldn't find anybody that had actually voted.
Except those who are committed that I would call the political class. And in this city, and we showed a stat last week, thank you very much, Pedro, because that was a really great stat you put out there. They had a breakdown of the registration. There are 23, almost 24,000 Democrats, registered Democrats, very close with the unenrolled. Republicans were 3,500. And you know that out of 23,000 Democrats, it's pretty easy to get 3,000 or 4,000 of them to the polls to vote the way you want to vote. Because Agnes Rickel gets her whip out and whips them all in line. You know?
Agnes has been around for a long time. She's
Yeah,
very effective.
And she's tough. And you know, I respect that lady. She's a tough lady. I disagree with her politics, but she does what she believes.
Yeah.
And when she cracks that whip, they march like little penguins. Talk about they're flightless birds. Might say gutless too. Anyway, let me move on and thank you for that comment. Hopefully, and this has to do with debates, Joe, there will be some real answers that contain actual plans of action. This is really good to resolve the city's budget deficit, including the city's failure to meet its net school spending requirement. There are many contributing factors to the deficit, such as exorbitant city and Lynn Public School salary positions that need to be eliminated because they are not needed or necessary, and the overwhelming increase in student enrollment, particularly the hundreds of out-of-country students enrolling each year who will require special additional programs, services, and accommodations. The costs that cost millions of dollars each year. Also contributing to deficits are the abundance of subsidized public housing units that continue to be built and nonprofit organizations continuing to replace tax-paying businesses. Until the City Council and the school committee members are willing to acknowledge that these problems exist, are in fact contributing factors and take real action to resolve them, the city will continue on its doomed financial economic path. This individual should run for political office. This individual,
Do you know who wrote that, Joe? Who
I have
sent
no
that
idea.
message in?
Huh?
You don't know who sent that message
No,
in?
I don't. And I've always argued why that we don't, they post it, because if they're willing to put their name to it, I don't see any reason why we can't use their name. But for some reason, you can take this up on the board, by the way, because that's the only reason why they don't allow it. This is their policy here. And they believe they're reflecting the policy of the board. If that's not the policy of the board, and I would argue that if a person is willing to put their name on it, we should be able to identify that person. Think about it. Oh, this is cute. That's right, Joe Jeremy is talking.
I didn't know I was going to get work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, on the flip side, it's up for you. And you can read that for me. The city is what?
It says the city is overrun with opiates. What has the state and federal government done to combat this? Rehab means too late.
That's a great point. Once they're in rehab, the horse is already out of the barn.
Well, they're on their way to recovery, but you know what? I think education in probably the schools and maybe probably kindergarten needs to happen. You know, of the dangers of getting involved in this stuff.
Well, I used to smoke cigarettes, and I smoked for a lot of years, and I stopped. I don't know why I stopped. In fact, talk about anniversaries. I think this is my 3rd year that I haven't smoked, coming up in October. Now,
Do you ever cheat?
What was that?
Do you ever cheat? Have one?
I haven't had one, no.
No,
I don't know
no.
why. I just stopped, and that was it. And I can't tell you that I don't miss. Well, actually, I don't miss it for some strange, odd reason. But for years, they said, you know, persuasion, don't smoke, kept jacking up the price. So finally, there's a lack, and it's socially a stigma to smoke, right? It worked. We can do the same thing with opiates, but we don't. We turn around, we make excuses for it. We make excuses for people who start using them more than they should, instead of really pounding away at what it does to your brain, what it does to your body. You know, I'd go to the Science Museum and see what a lung looked like from a smoker, and I didn't smoke for a while. And then I forget about it and start smoking again.
Yeah.
So I think that the constant message is how bad these things are, and society gets behind it and stops making excuses and look at people who are addicted as being victims. You know, they are, but don't stress it. You know, they also have what they call free will, and they also have a concurrent responsibility to themselves and their family. So I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little too harsh.
I don't know what the answer is.
I don't either.
I know that by the end of my career, I was as good at injecting Narcan into people as I was at squirting water on fires.
That's right. You guys, I forgot about
We
that.
get a lot of practice at it.
But in that, in effect, is like a safety blanket. And they know about that. They say, well, you know what? If I OD, you know, a fireman or a policeman is going to give me a, you know, recovery shot. That doesn't help. That's like a little...
But the thing that gets kind of lost in that is that people kind of use that as a crutch. Like if something happens, somebody's going to save me. But dead is dead. If somebody's dead, you can put all the Narcan in the world in them. You're not bringing them back.
Why don't we as a society stress that point? You know, your life is more valuable, and like Joe Carritte said, in very simple terms, dead is dead. I mean, that's like, you know, that's Shakespearean.
But, you know, on some occasions, we would show up at an overdose, and they'd say, aren't you going to give them the Narcan? I'm like, no, it's too late. They're dead. You can't bring them back from the dead. If they're still alive, you can bring them out of it, hopefully, depending on, you know, what was mixed with it. You know, some of the stuff that they're mixing with heroin now is, you know, it's really hard to bring people out of that overdose.
It's a serious, serious problem. And that's also related and connected to open borders.
Everything's open borders.
It is, because there's been a marked increase in drug addiction in this country. And it's also complicit of the pharmaceutical companies, some of them are complicit, and doctors who prescribe.
Well, what happened to the price of Narcan when it started, you know, to be police and fire started carrying it? I mean, the price went up.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Boston Street, Ward 1, is becoming zombie land for addicts from Flax Pond to Washington Street. There are people living, doing narcotics openly. I'm not aware of that because I don't go to that area that often. If this is true, that's a sad commentary.
I can't comment on that because, I mean, the credit union I work in is on Boston Street, and I don't see people walking around in a stupor all the time.
Well, if that's the case, folks, please let us know if that's been noticed, because that's not a healthy environment. This individual takes a walk every day, ends up at Wendy's. I suspect that's on the Linway, the Wendy's on the Linway.
Yeah.
For lunch. Always see zombies walking down Linway from the methadone clinic. Where's the methadone clinic? I don't even know where it is. Do you know?
On Circle Ave. If you go down Commercial Street and go straight across to where the DPW yard is and take a right, the next corner has the methadone clinic on it.
So this individual who's taking a walk would, in effect, be walking in that general area because he's talking about Wendy's. All right. So I'm glad to hear that. So that's where the methadone clinic is. He says the city is full of zombies. By that, I'm referring to the fact that they're addicted, right? They're walking around as if they're...
I'm assuming that's what he's referring to.
Sad, and that's a good word, sad. Good idea to talk about why we need so many mental health places and halfway houses. Why not in Marblehead? That's a great point. I mean, I do not see halfway houses and mental health institutions and clinics in places like Marblehead, as they should do their fair share of taking care of society's problems as well as we do. We don't have to inherit their problems, but we do, and we service them.
Well, I mean, look at other things like affordable housing, or what do they call it now? Workforce housing.
Is that what they call it?
Originally was low-income housing, then it became market rate housing, and now it's workforce housing.
Oh, really? So they play with words and semantics.
Right, but basically, you know, Lynn has 30%. Does Swampscott, does Marblehead,
No.
does North Andover, does Boxford, Topsfield?
But doesn't that compound our problem?
Oh, absolutely. But
So why, I mean, this is an election season, Joe, and I'm going to get into these things, and frankly speaking, is going to get into these issues because they need to be talked about. I don't have the answers, Joe, and I'm not going to pretend, folks, that I do. But if you can identify where there's a problem, then you should be able to try to think of possibilities of curing that problem. If they're uncurable, that's one thing. But, you know, the housing stock, we have a disproportionate amount of subsidized housing stock, which creates a magnet for societal problems, basically.
Well, if, you know, build it, they will come.
Joe, the simplicity of your genius amazes me. Build and they will come.
Build it and they will come. But do you see, you know, the cities that I just mentioned, building affordable housing, low-income housing?
Folks, I want you to take that statement from Joe Carritte, underline it, put a couple exclamation points. Build and they will come. Therefore, do not build and they will not come. That's the offset of that, right?
Well, I mean, look at the development on the Beacons Chevrolet site. You know, you get all these groups screaming about why aren't there, you know, low-income housing.
Well, we don't have enough?
Well, that was my point, Joe. If we're at 30%, you know, what is Marblehead at? What is Swampscott at?
2, if that.
So that's why, you know, the developer doesn't want any low-income housing there. He's trying to make market rate housing to make a profit, bring in working class people in the city,
and you know,
to spend money in the city.
You know what capitalism is good at? You work hard. Instead of driving around in a Hyundai, you might end up driving around an Escalade. The problem that I have is I see people running around with Escalades who have EBT cards. I mean, that amazes me. You know the reason why all cities in the area sadly see us as a dumping ground, meaning Lynn? At a certain point, you gotta say enough is enough with places like that. And the point was, years ago, other cities need to pick up the slack. I agree, 1,000%. I said this 35 years ago, and they called me all kinds of names. You know, heartless. Oh, he's a Republican. You know how heartless they are. And they, all of this type of jargon, because you simply said, maybe, just maybe, we should share as a community the problems. But they don't want to do that. Now, did you know that Lynn TV has launched an election section on their website? Did you know that, Joe?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah.
You probably commissioned it. With videos and bios and more for the candidates running for school committee, city council, mayor. So, folks, visit lyntv.org, is it, /elections? Is that the one?
Yeah.
They gave us this to put
No,
up.
this is right, lyntv.org/elections.
And can you read the red?
Leave comments and messages on facebook.com/frankly speaking Lynn or lyntv.org/frankly speaking.
So, if you folks out there want to comment on anything, and by all means, we'd love to hear ideas from you about what you think is important, particularly during this election year. Yeah, they're the ones that do the voting. They're the ones that are affected by what happens. They're the ones who should be telling us what they think ought to be done so we can relay it. And this is what the whole idea of community TV is, so we can relay their thoughts to the mayor and the challenger and the council and the at-larges and the school committees, and let them understand what they're sensitive about. They're paying the freight, those folks out there, the subscribers, you know?
And, you know, earlier somebody, one of your comments alluded to debates. I mean, I think that's a great way for people to see where candidates stand on the issues facing the city.
But Joe, I'm a fan of conversations because debates are structured and everybody who comes to debate has a horse in the race, whereas a conversation, you sit, for example, in the mayor's race, you sit one candidate here, one candidate here, they sit in front of this camera and they talk back and forth about things. All they need is a referee, like in a boxing match, right, that says that's below the belt, that's it, or, by the way, that's round one is over, now it's round two. And that's it, and let them go back and forth. You know, because everything that's scripted is scripted. Scripted is no good.
Yeah, but if you take two people and stick them in a room and say, go ahead, have at one another, it's going to turn into a brawl, isn't it?
That's the whole point. Well, then you can see the people who can...
I want to know, I would rather see a forum where people write in with questions and the candidates answer the questions.
Okay, but I want those questions to be universal so that nobody edits them except if they're profane, right?
Well,
but we have to... Joe, by the way, please come again. I've really enjoyed it, and I think the folks out there learned a lot.
Well, you haven't heard the comments from the show yet. They may say, don't ever have that guy on again.
They're not going to say that. They're going to say that he was pithy in his answers, right? Pithy. Do you know that word? Huh? Yeah.
Pithy.
In other words, build it and they'll come. On that note, folks, have a great week.
Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Loved having you.